On this episode of Over-Revved, I buy a 1993 GMC Jimmy, fix it up, and then put on a little bit of my own flair. This is my new to me 1993 GMC S-15 Jimmy. Big plans for this thing to be an awesome little four-wheel drive vehicle, but I wanted a clean slate, something unmolested, very clean, in good shape, and this was it. I got a screaming deal on it. One of the reasons I got such a good deal on it though was it was supposed to be a runner driver. We showed up down south. Luckily I brought a trailer because this thing was misfiring really bad, having a little bit of mechanical issues. Misfires really make me nervous, but state that this thing was in and how clean it was, couldn't leave it. So we worked out a deal, made things happen, brought it home with us. So before we start tearing into all the fabrication and the ripping and the tearing, we need to make sure this thing runs and drives good. So we've got quite a checklist of items that we need to pull it into the garage and start going through, because I want to make sure that I've got a clean daily driver. I want it to run good, I want it to perform, I want everything mechanical to be in good shape, and then we'll start tearing into the big ideas that we have to maybe make it into something that we can take the family and the kids out. And that's what we wanted. We wanted something small that fits on these Pacific Northwest trails, because they are very tight trail systems for a full-size rig, but we needed 4 doors, we need to be able to fit the car seats, and I want some creature comforts, and this is what I landed on. This is kind of a good platform, I think. I've got a rack and pinion steering, I've got a full frame, it's not a subframe vehicle. I've got that reliable Chevy 4.3 V6 platform, got a 4L60 automatic transmission in it. So I've got an overdrive, I've got cruise control, I've got air conditioning, power windows, factory power locks with a key fob. So I'm very excited about this thing. It's gonna be like taking a Cadillac on the trail compared to the rigs that we've had in the past. But like I said, we need to make sure all of that's working, running and driving good, and then I will feel better about tearing into it as far as the four-wheel drive and suspension aspect, and just make that thing all that much better. Okay, so our 93 Jimmy has got the Chevrolet Vortec, well, maybe not Vortec, I don't know the difference. But it's got the Chevy 4.3 V6, and it's got a misfire that's pretty severe. Definitely down on power. Some don't seem right. Last owner's got a new coil kind of zip tied in here that he put in there. And he said he put a distributor and new plugs, which he seemed to not know about the misfire. Of course, the car did sit a lot, and it was their second car. They didn't really use it all that much. But it almost seems like maybe some parts were getting thrown at it to try to fix it in the first place. But I think I'm just gonna go back to square one. Let's yank the plugs out of it, do a quick compression test, make sure I'm not, you know, spending time chasing my tail when there's actually a bigger problem going on. And then we can maybe jump back and make sure that that distributor's put in correctly, we've got the correct timing, that we don't have maybe a fouled plug or a burn up wire. Fingers crossed it's something simple, because this thing is super clean, it's super cool. So I want it to be in good shape. So I'm really hoping that it's a quick fix and we find something that just got maybe overlooked or something cheap that needs to be replaced, and we're back on the road. I'm not saying it's a problem yet, but I don't think that looks very good. That might have been leaking a little bit of air. When you got to pull the steering shaft to pull a spark plug, that's just madness. I don't think I'm having fun with my new toy anymore. So huge relief. I just did a compression test on it, because the more we were diving into it, the more I was feeling like somebody's already been chasing this problem. They acted kind of like it was maybe new to them, but it's just too coincidental. We got a misfire, and I've got a coil pack that's new, zip tied in there. I've got plug wires that look like they're new or been replaced. He mentioned he replaced the distributor, so as I was checking some of this stuff, it was kind of wearing on me, and I thought, let's just do a compression test and make sure I don't have a dead cylinder or something. It all looks good. I'm happy with those numbers. I don't think we have a compression problem, so that's good. I'm probably going to call it a night because I did get started a little late, but I think I'm just going to keep going on the route I am doing. I already ohm checked the wires, and now I'm just going to kind of work my way through the distributor, double check timing, all that stuff, and just make sure all the fundamentals are there. It is fuel injected, and it's got electronic ignition on it. So that kind of sucks, especially this early stuff. I hate fooling around with that because you got computers and whatnot involved. So there's going to be multiple things we got to check rather than just, does it have fuel, spark, and air? We're going to have to check sensors and coolant temp sensors and NOx sensors and all that jazz. But we'll start diving into it, work our way through it. Now that I know the compression's good, I got a little bit higher hopes that we might be able to fix this and it'll be a good running little engine. Okay, jumping in on another late start. Did that compression test last night. I labeled all the plugs. I didn't see anything crazy or out of the ordinary. They definitely look old and cruddy though. So, and like I mentioned before about that steering shaft being in the way and those being a big pain to get to, I picked up some new plugs just to throw new plugs in there while we're in there. If I've gone that far, why not? It just makes sense. Let's just put new plugs while we have that apart. So I'm gonna throw those new plugs in it, get all my plug wires put back on, and then just continue our checklist of looking at stuff. We'll make sure we're getting good spark down to the spark plug still. We'll double check that timing, make sure the coil and the distributor seem okay. We'll go from there. Okay, I did pull the cap just to double check that our rotor's in the correct place with our marking on the crank. I just kind of want to go through and make sure all that looks good so we're not missing something silly. But I did notice a ton of carbon on the points of this cap, and the rotor looks pretty bad too. That could definitely cause some misfire issues. I'm not going to say it's our problem yet, but I'm going to clean this up really good, pull that rotor off, clean that up really good, and then continue checking to make sure that I'm on the right track and that I am. My rotor is on the #1 plug when our piston's at top dead center over there. Okay, not for sure yet, but it's running a heck of a lot smoother than it did. So I'm gonna let it warm up here for a minute, just kind of watch it. If we get really lucky, we'll back it out and take it for a quick cruise. That'd be awesome if all that carbon and the plugs were just so bad that it's causing the misfire. I usually never get that lucky, so we'll let it do its thing, see what happens. Okay, cool. Misfire seems to be fixed. Did have an engine light on there, but once I cleaned up the timing wire that I had to unplug, I think I just had a bad connection there, and disconnected the battery, cleared the engine light, and since then took it for a drive. Everything seems to be good, so I think I lucked out big time. I always expect the worst when it's something like that or engine misfires. We never get lucky with those. Think we got lucky this time, so that's good. Next on our agenda, we've got anti-lock brake light on. I'm not really worried about that right now because with the plans we have for this thing, not gonna really call for the anti-lock brakes to work, and they probably aren't gonna work, at least in the beginning, when I do the axles. And you might have heard some squeaking coming from the front end. It's got some worn out bushings, worn out parts, but I don't think I'm gonna concern myself with those all that much either because all of that is getting cut out of this thing. But one major thing is we're leaving the powertrain alone in this, and it has electronic shift control, and the last owner claimed that four-wheel drive high range was not working correctly. Now, when I test drove the thing, which was as much of a test drive as I could do with it misfiring as bad as it did, this switch did light up when I put it into high range. And when I shifted it into low range, it definitely put the transfer case into low range. So that's good. My main concern was I'm hoping that I don't have any transfer case issues. So what we're gonna do is jack the thing up and try to verify that the four-wheel drive is working. And before I do that, I might even just take it out in the driveway and maybe put it in a little bit of a bind and see if I can notice the front end scrubbing. If it is, then I know the front end must be turning. If it's not, then we might have a switch or a shift motor issue. I have heard rumored that these are vacuum. I haven't looked yet. So let's dive into that. Okay, let's go fire this thing back up and take it outside and see what we can learn. Okay, so even though we don't need to be in neutral, we'll go neutral. So she blinked, but she's not lit up. So it blinked, but didn't light up this time, which last time it did light up. I don't feel like it's scrubbing on the front tires. Okay, I'm not totally sold that four-wheel drive isn't working. I think the switch just isn't necessarily lighting up and shutting back off like it should. Now, the day I test drove it, it did stay lit up and I had to cycle it back to two-wheel drive. But it seemed like it's switching in there. And when we went back to 4 high, the switch wasn't lit up, which would make you think that it's no longer in 4 high or that it didn't go into 4 high. But when I tried to load it up, it definitely feels like it's got drive to the front and the rear. It doesn't want to spin any of the back tires or nothing like that. So I wonder if it's just maybe a switch not lighting up. Okay, we're gonna call that undetermined for now. I will dive into it later on. Definitely something we wanna make sure that works if it's gonna be an off-road rig. But one thing that's killing me is this cluster. It's all digital, they're super cool. I want mine to work, and I definitely need it to work too for my gauges. I got no fuel gauge, no temperature gauge, no oil pressure gauge. So now I do know that there are companies that you can send these to and they can fix them and send them back to you. And I've seen a couple videos where you can take out this little power or whatever you want to call it, unsolder it, replace it, solder it back together. That fixes it. And some people say that there's just some cracks on the soldering and you can fix it with a simple connection. So let's take a look at it, see what we're dealing with, and see if it's something simple. If it's not, maybe we'll send it out to get it fixed, but we need gauges. Oh, what in the... I'm just taking shots in the dark at this point. I was hoping, taking that stuff off underneath, I could access this a little better. It's like the heater controls and there's a cable, and I'm just nervous to break any of it. But it ain't coming off very easy. I have no idea how I am gonna get that back in there, because that was a pain in the butt. It doesn't seem like there's any easier way to access it. Whatever. Keep plugging away. All right, so dash is out. I took one look at that thing and thought, no way. I don't even know what I'm looking at. So, like I was saying earlier, there are people online that will repair these. It's like a couple $100. You can send it to them, and they say they put more updated, newer parts in them. Get a little bit of warranty. I've also heard don't put another used one in there. The odometer won't read right. Who knows if that's true. There's another one that says you're just putting an old, outdated one that's going to go out on you later anyway. So they're probably right. So I'm just going to spend the money, send it off to somebody who can fix it and give it back to me. And I know when I put this whole rat's nest back together, it's not just going to turn off a couple miles down the road. It might actually last me a little while. So I think that's what we'll do. Now that being said, on the cluster, that means that we're probably going to be stuck out of commission for just a little bit, waiting on parts because the dash is in pieces and we're not really ready to start cutting it up yet. But there are a few other little things going on. Pretty sure we've got a tensioner pulley making a ton of noise when I fired it up. So that pulley noise, pretty sure it's coming from this tensioner pulley because I put my hand on the tensioner, felt a lot of it, and the belt on it doesn't look like $1 million either. Of course, it's not making noise, but I thought if I weaseled it out of there, I might replace it. Now, it just so happens, my uncle picked up this serpentine belt at a yard sale just for the heck of it. It was like in a free box or something. I think when I ran that part number last time, it was for a Chevy 350. Now, this isn't a 350, but everything I've heard about these things is that they are practically a 350 missing 2 cylinders. So maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe this belt fits it. Don't even know, but we might try it out. But in the meantime, I'll take the belt off, see if I can spin that pulley by hand. I don't know if that'll make the noise evident. We'll try to dive into it, make sure we are replacing the right part. Okay, the more I play with it, the more I'm thinking I made the right choice on this. So, get a new one of these because that's super annoying when you're listening to this thing. And then a couple other things. Okay, call me a diva, call me high maintenance, whatever, but I got a froze up door jamb switch on the door, and the other one on the passenger side isn't working, and that controls your dome lights, makes them come on and off when you open the door. Probably not a big deal to most people, but it's literally like a $6 switch, and we're gonna be off-road, wheeling, whatever, and even in the dark, even if I'm not off-road and wheeling, I really like my lights to come on when I open up the door so I can see what I'm doing and see inside the rig. So I'm gonna fix those. Let's yank them out. Well, you know it works, you know it's just a switch, because apparently I was grounding it out on the door jamb when I pulled it out. All right, now that those are out, I'll stop at the parts store on my way home from work tomorrow, pick those parts up, slap them in there, and then we might be on hold for just a little bit because we got to get our cluster back. And like I said before, I'm not necessarily ready to dive into cutting the frame and everything else up. I kind of want to fix these things and do a little road testing on it and make sure mechanically we are in the clear. We got a good, solid candidate before we start all this other stuff. So, until another day. Okay, we're back. Picked up some parts from the parts store. Got that pulley that we needed for that noise, which hopefully that fixes it. Pretty sure it will, but some door jamb switches, or just one. They had to order one. And I also got a window motor, and I'll kind of show you why we're gonna be replacing that, or why I suspect that that's a problem. But just keep plugging away on our little stuff while we're waiting for the bigger stuff to happen. But let's get started on putting that idler pulley on there, and maybe this belt, if that works out, and see if that takes care of our pulley noise. Seems a lot better than the old one. I am gonna regret pulling this off. Okay. Now watch this belt make more noise than the old belt. because the old belt was probably fine. You know, I'm willing to bet those are pretty identical belts. So let's see if we can stretch this new one on there. I'm learning that these 4.3s and these little S10s are just stuffed in here. Seems like everything I've done so far is just tighter than ever to get to. Give this thing a quick fire and make sure that fixed our issue. She's nice and quiet, so that's good. Problem fixed. Definitely seems to still be starting hard, especially initial starts when it's cold. My misfire's fixed, so that's great, but I think maybe I've got something else kind of going on there. So I might dive into that a little bit later. I might be curious to check maybe what my fuel pressure reading is, make sure I don't have a fuel pump maybe getting weak on me too. I know the spider injection, people talk about that spider injection, plenum manifold injection stuff can be a little bit of a problem too, but sometimes when I'm back towards the back, I feel like I can hear the pump kind of doing some funny stuff. So we'll dive into that later. I'm not too worried about it at the moment. It is still running, but I would hate to have that leave us stranded somewhere, especially with that fuel pump being in the tank and all that good stuff. So we might pick up a test kit, check into that, but for now, we'll just keep plugging away on the little stuff. Okay, so here's my window issue. She'll only roll up or down about a couple inches, and then she'll just stop. And when she stops, she's done. Now, I'm not positive that that's that window motor, but I'm kind of assuming window motor's probably getting weak. It's just taking a poopy on me. So we're gonna take this trim off. We'll see if we can pop this door panel off. I've got a new motor. We'll get a new motor installed in this thing. Go from there. These door panels make me so nervous because when you have a good door panel like this, it's not all broken and hanging apart. The last thing you want to do is break it. And you can't really see any of the clips. See, just like that, like I was talking. What in the heck? These old clips are being a real pain in the butt. Ooh. Ouch. Okay. Okay. I think we were successful. My nerves are shot though. It pains me to take this stuff off. It'll never stick the same. You can pretty much tell that this door panel has probably never been opened. Now, it does appear like this window motor though is riveted in. Well, that's interesting. Huh. This ought to be fun. Okie dokie. Okay, this thing is rivets on rivets on rivets. So that ought to be interesting because I don't think I have anything big enough to rivet the regulator back to the door. I can bolt it, but I gotta, you know, it's in a pretty tough spot. So you'd almost want to do like nut certs on this or something. But I'll figure that out, and I gotta take this motor off and either rivet it back on, or the kit came with some screws so we could screw it on, but I definitely would want to like Loctite that or something. So I'm just gonna take a gander at this thing for a minute, figure out the best way and how I want to do it. All right, thought I'd spare you all the boring details. We got the motor drilled out. I actually re-riveted the motor rather than using those little nuts and bolts. I was just worried about them loosening up. And I ended up bolting this back to the door. I think it worked out okay, but before I put everything back together, I'm just gonna run it up and down, make sure our problem's fixed, and also make sure that my window's not hitting any of the bolts, and should be good. Cool, good enough for me. Now let's get this door panel all put back together. Call it a win on the window. Well, that takes care of one thing. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. All right, big day. Got our cluster back. We sent it off, got it fixed. Supposedly, we're gonna unbox this thing, check it out, throw it back in the Jimmy, and hopefully all of our gauges and cluster are working properly now, which is a huge step. I definitely wanted those gauges working, and I'm super excited to see what it looks like because it's all digital and cool. So fingers crossed, it's all set, it's good, and it'll be all illuminated and look super killer, super retro. Ooh, goodies. Oh yeah. All right, let's pull the old Jimmy in and slap it in, see if it works. Okay, think she's in. So, moment of truth. Oh, baby. Oh, that is killer. Take me back. Oh, I can't get enough of it. Let's see if everything works, tack, all that good stuff. Oh my Lanta. How cool is that? Now, a couple things I'm curious about. The fuel gauge is reading full, which might be correct. I don't know how much fuel was in it, but I only put a few bucks in it last time I took it to the station, so unless it was already full, but I guess we'll see. This is so cool. I love it. Huge win on the cluster. I'm very excited about that. And I think they say that the parts they put in them are a little bit more new, updated type thing. So I'm hoping it lasts and it doesn't go out on me or quit. So that is awesome. I'm stoked to have that. Who thought an old digital cluster would have me so over the moon? Takes me back to like my childhood days, you know, like all the old toys and weird stuff. Anywho, I've got some maintenance parts that I picked up, wiper blades, oil, filter. We don't know when that was changed, so I'm gonna drain that all out of it, change that stuff, make sure that's good to go. And we might crawl under there and take another look at the four-wheel drive, just to, might jack it up, make sure everything's working like it should be in there. We also got a lot of work ahead of us putting the dash back together now that the cluster's in there. So I got to put all that. That was a pain getting those out, as you could have seen on the video. So now let's work on getting that all put back together, and then maintenance items. Okay, I clearly underestimated just how much that dash was going to fight me going back together. Should have known that outcome. It's a new day, of course, you can probably tell. Now that we're all finished with the dash, let's get to those maintenance items that I was talking about before, and let's jack this thing up and make sure that the four-wheel drive is working and that it's just a light issue. Like I said, with the test in the driveway and what we've seen, I think it's working, but let's verify that before we get out into a situation where we need it and we don't have it. Yeah, you could say space is limited in here. Figure while I'm at it, let's yank the wheels and tires off. We'll take a look at what's back there brake-wise, and then that'll give us a little bit more. I think we got a bad hub too. That'll give us a little bit more insight behind here, more view. Plus I might have a little secret plan for these wheels and tires anyways. All right, let's see if we can take a look and make sure everything's working like it should. So what's crazy is this differential under here must be vacuum actuated or something. And then the transfer case is too, because this is, front driveline doesn't spin at all. It's got like a motor up on the front differential, so throw that all in. I probably got to have it running too with vacuum. But let's throw that all into there, make sure everything's turning. Uh-oh. Okay, so when I did low range, it engaged. Okay, so it's clear I do have some sort of issue. Low range works fine. And it sounds like it's maybe shifting the transfer case, but nothing in the front end is turning. So I'm gonna go back to my trusty old book. This thing's helped me out a ton on this thing. So I'm gonna flip through this and see if I can find something. I also noticed my temp gauge is not working on the dash either. So I'm gonna verify which sensor in that block works for the gauge and just make sure, hopefully it's just a temp sensor and nothing inside the gauge cluster. Since I just had that fixed, that would be a bummer, but I didn't know if it worked or not when I sent it in. So that could bite me. But let's do a little reading, see if we can figure out what's going on. You want to see something completely outrageous? I just spent a couple minutes rolling around underneath this thing looking for the oil filter so we could do an oil change. Couldn't find it. Pretty sure that is it right down there. What in the world? Just thinking before this oil change, this thing is not the easiest engine bay to work in so far with the problems that we've had. And now I see this. I mean, where does it even drain to? That's gonna be a mess. Good thing I got diapers, I guess. But this whole air box is gonna have to come out of the way. Engineers, man. Somebody somewhere is probably going, that's how you did that, huh? And then somebody somewhere else might be going, hey, that's how you did that, huh? Sure, there's a better way. I'm just not aware of it. Definitely don't want that sucker leaking. Okay. Giving it that good. And by good, I mean the cheapest oil on the shelf. All right, no oil change service. Jiffy Lube Quick Stop would be complete without a couple. Would be complete without a couple of add-ons. Would be complete without a couple of key pieces. New wiper blade. Even got a little guy for the rear. Don't think the rear wiper was working, but just in case. Oh, that sucker already looks new. And it's a Michelin. Whatever. And lastly, a new smelly. That way when you hop in here and burn it down the road, you're not just feeling the success, you're smelling the success. Okay, so to recap, we still got a temp gauge not working, and I picked up a sender to just throw parts at it, but I got the wrong sender, so I'm not doing that right now. And we've got hubs in the front that are loose, brakes that probably need to be replaced. I'm not gonna worry about any of that, because I got bigger plans. And those plans don't involve having that front end underneath this Jimmy any longer. So I'm not gonna spend any money on that front end. But we got our oil changed. We got a little bit more diagnosing to go through for the 4-wheel drive. But let's get the wheels and tires back on this thing, get it back on all 4, and we'll go from there. Okay, now that we're back on the ground, I did a quick search. People on this one forum were talking about the computer that runs the 4-wheel drive system could get a trouble code in it. Not saying that that's what is going on, but they did talk about pull the fuse, let it sit for 2.5 minutes, put it back in, cycle the key, and then take it for a drive. It's a long shot, but he was having the same issues that I'm having. Don't even know if it fixed that guy's issue, but I figure I'm gonna go drive it anyways, so might as well spend 2.5 minutes pulling a fuse and cycling a key and just see if I get super lucky and it fixes it. Hooky doke, here we go. So 5 ignition cycles now. We'll see if that fixes it. Unreal. Hood release ain't working. Battery's dead. Probably from having my hood up so long with the light on. Now what? How am I gonna get that sucker open? I don't know how I just got so lucky. I think I got it. Huh. Cable came loose or something. How does that even happen? Perfect weather to be testing out wiper blades today. Okay, test drive went all right, but 4-wheel drive, still no luck with the 4 high working. Low range engages, but no 4 high. So something's going on with there. I know I can pull trouble codes out of that, kind of like the engine light where it just blinks when you ground a couple of pins. Might try to do that, see if that maybe leads me in a certain direction. Hopefully it doesn't need one of those encoder motors they say on the transfer case. Not sure, but everything else is working other than our temp gauge. Drives okay. Front end's super squeaky, but like I said, that's supposed to go out. So Maybe that'll happen sooner than later. I don't know. I think I'll call that a night for tonight. So good news, I threw parts at something for once and it actually fixed my problem, which is something I don't recommend doing, but I did not really diagnose into it. Just kind of figured most likely it's a sensor. Fix my temp gauge. So that's cool. Next thing I'm addressing is, took this thing for a drive the other day, factory stereo, refuses to work. Clock comes on, lights are there, nobody's home. And it's driving me crazy. It is the most, I mean, I enjoy cruising classics with no radios. Not a big deal, but this thing is just a 90s blazer. I love it, but I'd love to have some tunes in it. So I went and dropped a little money when I shouldn't have been, but I figure while I'm in there, let's get a new deck, maybe a little thumping in the back, make it actually sound halfway decent. So we're gonna dive into that now. Yank the old stereo out, put a new nice shiny one in there, and get some wiring ran into the back if we can get that figured out, and get some tunes going. Let's start off by, I'll open up my dash kit, kind of get an idea what I want to do there. Open up the stereo. I did buy one of these super handy little pigtails, which are awesome, so I'll get that wired on for our deck. That way I can just plug it into the factory harness, so that'll be nice and easy. But we'll start laying all that out. That way we can get the new stereo in. Looks clean. And then I'll also figure out amp kit as well, because this will have to get ran down through the dash. So I'll figure out the dash part of that. This is also more than likely gonna have to go with my battery in that too. So a lot that goes with it, but we'll start up here in the dash, work our way back, then maybe back to the front. Pretty basic deck. We were strapped with a single DIN because that factory stereo is like almost doubled in size, but I think he referred to it as a DIN and a 3/4 or DIN and a quarter or something like that. So not quite big enough to put like a double DIN touchscreen, which is fine. I don't need anything fancy, so we're just gonna go with the little single DIN, maybe a little pocket below, whatever works. All right, on to our amp kit. We'll start locating where we want to put this and figuring out all the wiring. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it a night on this one. I've made a good dent in it. Most of my wiring is ran through the dash, back towards the rear of the vehicle for the amplifier. Most of my trim's off. Maybe tomorrow, if we get some time, I'll run my power wire. I'm gonna have to figure out where I wanna run it through the firewall into the back. Once we have everything wired up and tucked away, then it's the fun part. Put the deck in, see what's working. Hopefully the factory speakers even work, because we never heard the stereo play at all. So I could have blown speakers. I guess we'll hook it all up and see what we got. Okay, new day, stereo's all done. Now we're jamming. All the wiring's tucked away. Our panels are back on, that's great. The issue that we need to circle back to is that 4-wheel drive that's not working. 4 low works and it's engaging. 4 high, non-existent. Won't even light up or nothing. I'm sure that's why a lot of people probably don't desire these electronic shift models, especially the early ones. But from what I've seen online and forums and all that stuff, because I am clueless when it comes to how this works, there is a computer that runs it. And they did say that if it sets any kind of trouble code or whatnot, it'll default it to only 4 low. It won't let 4 high shift on the fly. I've tried to get this thing to blink or do whatever when you jump the pins on the connector, and it'll tell you the code that's in it. I can't get it to do nothing. So I'm just gonna start tracing old school. I'm gonna pull the switch down. I see he bought a switch at some point, looks used, but I'm just gonna make sure that the switch is toggling, because I feel like it should light up at least when you push it, and then the computer just wouldn't let it go. But let's start there, trace it back. Maybe we'll check the connectors on the computer, make sure they're good. See if we can get this working correctly before we try to do anything with it, you know, where we might get in a situation where we need it and we don't have it. Look, I know I just had this off, but I have a good feeling that this will not be the last time you see me take something back apart that I just had apart. At least this is the easy side, because that heater control side, I never want to do that again. Okay, from what I've read, you should be able to just shift this thing on the fly, at least if it's under 3 miles an hour, apparently, allegedly. So I should be able to just turn the key on. I shouldn't have to move it at a park into neutral like the low range, but I'm just guessing at this point. I'm sure there's somebody who messes with these all the time right now going, oh my God, it's this, but that's not me. So let's see what happens. Okay. Okay, I've got power to the switch. Now, interesting enough, if I ground this, the 4 high light comes on. So, let's see if we notice anything when we toggle it. Okay, so it's definitely transferring power, and I want to say that me grounding that is probably just the indicator switch that would be down on the transfer case would ground that to indicate that it's shifted. So switch appears to be working like it should, and that is gray with a black line. Okay, I'm an idiot because I literally just put all this back together, but from what I'm reading, it's called a TCCM, and it's the transfer case control module, and that runs this whole shebang. And I believe it's above the ECM, which is in this corner, right above all that trim that I just put back together. So I'm gonna take a look up in there and see if I can see it, figure it out, maybe pull it out, test it. Okay, pretty sure I see it up in there. So I'm gonna try to navigate my way up in there, unplug it, make sure there's no corrosion in the connector. And then I'm probably gonna test that switch and make sure it's sending power back and forth. I don't know, maybe power comes from this computer to the switch, so that won't even work, but we'll see what happens. So I'm gonna stick this test light in the pins of my connector. I think I've got 2 gray and black wires going into this computer, so I'm gonna stick this in there if I can, toggle the switch, and just make sure I am getting, you know, signal from the switch over to the computer, that kind of deal. Might have to recruit some help. Okay, go ahead. Okay, do it again. Okay, that's working. Okay, that's all I needed.
Is it working now?
No, I just was checking to see if the switch is telling the computer what to do. So we're getting signal from the switch to the computer, so I'm assuming that part of it works. And I don't see any corrosion or anything like that. So I'm trying to figure out how I can maybe test the computer sending signal. It's kind of tight in there, and I don't technically know. I guess I can check and see that same color code and see if that's it. Otherwise, I'll have to maybe climb back, unplug the motor on the transfer case to see if it's getting any kind of signal. Okay, so as you can clearly see, but it is going to the computer, and then that other gray and black wire coming from the computer is getting power, and I know it wasn't, you know, from the switch when it was unplugged, so it means it's going through the computer back. So I think my next step is going to be, I'll jack this thing up, wheel underneath of it, unplug the selector motor on the transfer case. I have heard that's common, but let's unplug that and see if I'm getting power back to the encoder motor, which shifts the transfer case. What I'm looking at now is this motor right here. Goes onto the side of the transfer case. I'm trying to see how many bolts, but there is a plug on the back side of this, and I am going to unplug that thing right now and see. Oh, it's a bolted in plug. And maybe see if I can test it and see if I'm getting some sort of talking to this thing or not. Ah, bummer. Every time. What a terrible spot. Just tell you right now, if you're thinking about buying one of these because they look like they're easy to work on, don't. Okay. How do I want to test this thing? Now that's what I'm dealing with. So now let's see if we can figure out which one's which and test it. Just toggle that switch again.
Off?
No, just click it.
Off.
Click it.
Nothing.
Click it. Test some wires. Click it. So I toggled power there. It toggles, but there's no power down here. That seems weird. I'm about ready to beat my head against a wall. I didn't see anything obvious inside that connector. I didn't see any corrosion. I also don't have any power coming to it, which doesn't necessarily mean I have a wiring issue. It could just mean that that computer maybe isn't sending power. I know it's nothing with my vacuum actuator up in the front. The switch doesn't even blink when you hit it, and there's nothing going to the encoder motor, but I know it switches into low range, so that works correctly. I found another write-up that is talking about another way to jump these pins. I'm gonna try that to see if I can see some trouble codes in there, and then I might try to reset this again if I can. If it'll clear it, great. And then if it comes back, I would know. This is very kind of an irritating problem to have, because you can't really find a wiring diagram. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of ways to check stuff when it comes to the encoder motor or the computer. It's just kind of, if it set this code, replace it type deal. So anyways, let's jump these pins, these other pins, see if I can maybe get some blinking or know what kind of code is in there. Blink in 1 and then 1, 2, which is a code 2, which they say is the encoder motor. And then a code 1, that's like a power loss. So that could be just from me unplugging it and whatnot. So I'm gonna try one more time to reset this and see if it kind of fixes what's going on. Now, I think technically if I reset it or get it to clear the codes, I think it should try to work at least, or maybe it'll work and then it'll kind of quit again, or maybe it'll just fix itself. I don't know. But let's try that. I pull the fuse for 2.5 minutes, and then that should clear the code 2, and then they say to clear the code 1, I have to cycle the ignition 5 times. So for that 2.5 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and just start maybe throwing all my trim back together, because I don't think I'm gonna need it out. If it is a code 2, and they're telling me online that just replace the encoder motor, so I don't think I've got a computer problem, so I don't think I'll have to get back to any of this trim. I don't think. Fuse is back in. I think we're good. So now let's do 5 ignition switches and then I'll fire it up and see if that did it. Okay. Oh, okay. I think we're working. All that clowning around for possibly nothing. Now, I'm not saying this fixed it. Let's take this out, see what it does. Because they did say you could do this and it'll clear the code and it might work once or twice. But if there is a problem with the encoder motor, it'll come back. Definitely feels like it's in. Yeah, for sure. It feels like it's working. Okay, let's definitely working. So that's all good, but we'll see if it keeps working. And let's take it up and make sure it shifts back out of it. Okay. I should be able to shift it on the fly. Okay, seems like it worked. I'm gonna live in that fairy tale make-believe land and say it's fixed. But at least I know from looking and what we've seemed to have found is that if it does come back, I know what the problem is and I'll replace it. But I'm definitely gonna wait and make sure that it does come back, because it could have just been a fluke. And if it is, that'd be great. It saves me a $100 plus encoder motor and the time of me putting it in. So we'll run it, see if it works. I feel a little bit better knowing that it seems to fault to four low. So at least if we are out playing and I get in a situation, it sounds like I'll be able to still use my low range, and then I can shift it back. One of the last things is the fuel pump. You might remember in the beginning when we were doing a little bit of diagnosing, I picked up a fuel test kit, did find that the fuel pressure was low. We replaced the fuel filter. It did a little bit of a jump, but it was still technically falling below spec. I've noticed it's still, every once in a while when you fire it up, cranks a little longer than I feel like it should, or it even kind of has a little bit of a sputter, which I might still be chasing maybe something else going on with our ignition system, but my fuel gauge is also reading full all the time. So it needs a new sending unit anyways to fix the fuel gauge. So I'm gonna put a new pump while I'm in there too, because it just makes sense. And with it falling below spec, I'd rather just do it and not have it fail on me somewhere while we're out driving. So I'm gonna drop the tank. Hopefully it doesn't take me that long. Put a whole new setup into it, throw it back up in there, and hopefully we're starting a little better, a little quicker, and hopefully our fuel gauge is reading a little better. Oh, shit. Ah, boy. That's not good. That is not good at all. Ooh, that's heavy. Well, stretched everything out. This is not going to be fun putting back in. Not at all. That sucked. Okay. And with any luck, I dropped a ton of crud down into the tank that'll just suck into that pump and clog the filter, and we'll be doing this all over again. But at least we'll be tuned up on it. Okay. This ought to be fun, getting this back where it needs to go. So I ran out of jack because I took my block out and forgot about it. So I'm currently running a strap from frame to frame to kind of hold it in place till I get my block on. Everything is just fine. This doesn't even remotely change or help my problem. Upset. Upset would be a good word. Oh, good. Got my nut and the jack's right in my way. Ah. And now we pray that this fuel pump turns on with the key, that the fuel gauge works, and that with any luck, we maybe fix some issues and didn't create any new issues. You know, like a fuel pump that don't work. That would be something I would do. Here we go. Okay, I heard it run. Fuel gauge is still reading full though. I don't think that's right. I'm gonna shut this off, cycle it, try to get a little air out of there. And then we'll maybe go drive it. Definitely seems like she fires up a little stronger. Go drive it, see if the power seems a little different or any better. Okay, quick side note. I didn't think that that fuel pump and sending unit did anything to fix our issues. I was wrong. Apparently, kids, throw parts at it. Take a shot in the dark. Because it worked out on this one for us. My fuel gauge, apparently I have more fuel in that tank than I thought. And the fuel gauge was still reading full, but I took it for a little drive. It is dropping. So, fuel gauge might have been working the whole time. I'm not sure. I'm gonna tell myself that it wasn't, just so I feel better about it in the end of the day. I did check the old fuel level sender, tried to ohm test it, had some pieces out of whack, so wasn't worth it. I don't know, but the fuel pump, peace of mind, I feel a lot better just knowing that that fuel pump tested below spec. So that's good. I'm glad to have that in there, and it does seem like it fires up a lot easier, runs a lot smoother. I'm still gonna tweak with it a little bit. I think it's just been sitting a lot. So we're gonna work the bugs out of it. But as far as I'm concerned, on that last drive that I did, my 4-wheel drive is shifting in and out. It's working good. It didn't go back to not working. My fuel gauge is working. She's firing up really good. Even if I sit for a couple days, fires right back up. It's running smooth, it's shifting smooth. So I'm gonna call that a win. All that being said, we're in a good place to where I'm just about ready to start diving into this thing to make it what we want to make it into. But got holidays, money's tight, budget's tight. We're all being squeezed at the end of the year, that's for sure. I have some of the parts, but I don't have all the parts to necessarily start diving into this thing. And I would like to wait till I kind of have them all, so it's not one of those projects, kind of like the Scout, tore it apart, now it's plugging up a bay, and it's sitting there until I get more parts for it. This, I don't want this to be the same thing. I'm enjoying it. I like driving it. I like having another rig that we can use. So I don't want to open up a can of worms that I'm not ready to close back up again. So I'm going to keep collecting those parts over the next few weeks, get through the holidays, and then we'll start tearing into this thing. But just because we're not ready to straight axle this thing just yet does not mean that we can't start having fun with it. Family wants to go get a Christmas tree, and I think that is a perfect excuse. Let's go take this thing into the hills with some friends. I used to have one of these things back in high school, and for some reason in my head, I remember it being way more capable up there in the snow than it should have ever been, and it was just a stock one of these things. I want to take this thing back up there, have a little fun with it, put the 4-wheel drive in, get us up in the snow, kids can do a little sledding, we can get our Christmas tree. It's just kind of an excuse to go get a Christmas tree, but really, it's because I want to go play in the snow and do a little wheeling. I'm missing out. I'm seeing a lot of videos. So we're going to gussy this thing up just a little bit to make it a little bit more what we need for when we get out there in the snow. One big upgrade that I think everyone's going to agree with me on, though, is these tires. Not that they're bald, but they are old. They're an all-season type tire, but we got something a little cooler that I'm gonna throw on this thing to give us a little bit of an advantage, because Lord knows we're gonna need it. We're going into some deep snow, and we got friends that are a whole lot bigger and taller than us. And we've got no ground clearance, no lockers. So I'm gonna do everything in my power to not be that anchor that's holding everybody up. So we're gonna start with the tires, and then we're gonna work our way around and give us a couple little add-ons. That way we make sure we can pack the tree back out, and we got some essential things that we might need on the way out there. All right, out with the old, in with the new. We got some new to us, definitely not new tires, but the price was right. Trailmark MS radials, super slick little MT looking tires, and they've got studs in them too. So I think these are definitely gonna help us bite when we get up into the snow a whole lot better than those worn out all season tires will do. So let's throw these on this bad girl. At least we've got a little bit of leg up on going out and playing in the snow. And these will help us look a little bit more serious and not get so laughed at. Well, here she is. Our 1993 Jimmy is finally done. It's reliable. The four-wheel drive's working, and she's looking oh so sweet. I'm very excited about this rig. It's super clean, it's everything I wanted it to be and more. And it's gonna be a perfect donor rig for the big plans that we have for it as far as being an off-road vehicle. Is it there? No, but I have never been more excited to take a totally stock vehicle off-road. It is just so much fun to drive. It's got all the creature comforts that I could ever want. And look at it. She's great. These awesome little snow studded meats that we were able to find and put on there. Got our luggage rack. Don't tell anybody. I've got a little bit of a game plan. Not just anybody can go out wheeling in a stock rig. You gotta kinda go incognito. If anyone finds out that I'm in a non-locked, non-lifted GMC Jimmy, they're probably gonna give me some looks. And now that I've got this custom stickered out roof rack, and I even threw on the mustache and put the awning on top there with it, now to just the right distance away, I'm probably just gonna look like your everyday Jeep Cherokee making his way down the trail. Now, most people, as soon as they see something with Jeep on it, they're not even gonna look twice. Hey, another guy in a stock Jeep Cherokee, no big deal. We've got big plans for this thing coming in the future. We're gonna have a little bit of fun with it. We've got a snow trip that's coming up that we're gonna take it on, get the four-wheel drive in and out of it, see how it does, see how everything's running and driving. But then we've got big plans to start ripping and tearing on this thing. We're gonna leave the powertrain alone, but I wanna put a straight axle under it, gonna beef up the rear end just a little bit. So we got big things coming for this little thing. Hopefully sooner than later, but for right now, I'm super stoked on it. I love the way it's looking right now. It's just a tough little machine. Yeah, she's 30 years old. Yeah, she creaks and groans. As far as I'm concerned, everything else is working and it's running and driving just the way we wanted it to. And I think in the end, it's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna have a capable 4x4. It's gonna have 4 doors so we can get the kids in and out of it super easy, which was a big deal to us. Plus, I'm gonna have power windows, power locks. Heck, I even have a factory key fob. Now, how many 93 GMC Jimmys or S-10 Blazer owners can say that they have a factory key fob that works? I'm winning. I'm on cloud 9. You're gonna see this thing coming in future episodes. We got a lot of work that's gonna get thrown underneath this thing, but we're trying to keep it budget because times are tough. Raising kids, money's tight. So this is a rig that I definitely picked up on the low end of the scale as far as funds, and I want to keep it that way. I'm trying to keep that dollar sign down super low and prove to myself and other people that for a reasonable amount of money, you can have a capable, fun, reliable, awesome rig that's not overly complicated. I'm going to try to keep this thing just reliable but capable. That's the whole theme. Reliable but capable. I think we're on the right track. I hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. Keep coming back for more. Make sure you hit that button. Make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to jump over to our social media on Instagram too, where you're gonna see a whole lot more of the stuff that we're doing, and you're gonna keep up on these projects. Make sure to tune back in too for the next episode that we do on this, and keep your eyes peeled for the episode where we take this out in the snow and see if it is capable at all in the form it's in, or if it's just a giant flop and we end up getting pulled all the way back down off the mountain. Thanks a lot, guys. Hope you enjoyed watching.